Can you believe that Karen showed up in my garden out of her mind saying that my ceramic dwarfs were government spies? She was serious. Some people are born to be crazy. Others choose the path. And there are those who go beyond the limits of sanity and make you wonder if they haven't fallen into an unauthorized episode of Black Mirror. The woman who moved in next door to me, she was that third type, a rare type of human being with an ego the size of a space station and paranoia worthy of a spy movie. The beginning of it all was quite innocent. I had just finished renovating my garden. Nothing much. A new grass mat, some new plants I'd picked up at Home Depot, and, as icing on the cake, 3 garden dwarves. In all honesty, I bought them because I saw a TikTok show where they danced with LED lights, and I thought, I want them. Was it an exaggeration? Of course. But the world is boring enough as it is, and if I can't put a smiling gnome with a plastic axe in my hand in front of my house, then we've already lost the culture war, right? It turns out that the neighbor, let's call her she, because even repeating her name gets tiresome, didn't have exactly the same sense of humor as me, or common sense, or a sense of reality, to be more honest. One Saturday morning, while I was watering my succulents in peace and harmony with the universe, she appeared like an apparition from beyond, the kind where you first smell her cloying perfume before you hear her squeaky voice. And of course, she didn't come to ask the names of the plants or praise the gnomes. She pointed with her finger, widened her eyes like she'd seen the devil rise from the earth, and let out, "Are those dwarves cameras?" At first I thought she was joking. I swear. I let out a laugh, a shy, slightly disconcerted laugh. But it wasn't a joke. She was serious. That woman, who dresses like she's going to sue someone at any moment, really thought that my ceramic dwarves were spying on her. She said they were surveillance technology in disguise, that they were connected to satellite systems, and that they probably transmitted data directly to a government center. And the most absurd thing, she claimed that all this was the fault of the new administration of the neighborhood, which, according to her, had partnerships with federal agencies. It was then that I realized that this wasn't just a mild outbreak. It was a complete collapse of reality, a collapse worthy of being documented by psychiatrists and scholars of human behavior. I tried to argue, of course. I showed them that the dwarves were made of resin, that they could barely stand on their own. But it was no use. She had already built up the narrative in her head. And once she believed it, my friend, you could call in the real FBI, and she'd think they were accomplices. Over the next few days, the situation escalated in a way that not even the scriptwriters of bizarre series could have predicted. First, the notes began. Pieces of paper folded up and thrown into my garden, as if I had the time or patience to read crazy people's manifestos. In one of them, she wrote that she was keeping an eye on my spying instruments, and that action would be taken. After that, the cameras started to appear. Not the government's. Karen, that's right. She installed not 1, not 2, but 5 cameras pointed directly at my garden, claiming that she needed to prove that she was being watched. Yes, the woman set up a complete surveillance system to prove that she was being watched by gnomes. The icing on the cake? She sent an email, yes, an email, to the neighborhood administration. A veritable treatise on insanity, with attachments and links to bizarre conspiracy theories. She claimed that I was part of an intelligence-gathering network, that my dwarves were the tip of the iceberg, and that the resistance needed to act before it was too late. The administration, of course, ignored it. But me, I was having fun, because there comes a point when you either play the game or you go crazy with it. And I chose to play. But instead of responding with a fight or arguments, I chose irony, satire, debauchery. If she thought my gnomes were spying on her, then I was going to give her real reason to freak out. And so began my journey into chaos. The next day, I went to a military costume store and bought everything I thought was remotely ridiculous and exaggerated. I put helmets on the gnomes, binoculars, small fake headphones, and an old walkie-talkie radio I found in the garage. I set up a whole special troop in my garden, and when she saw it, she nearly fainted. I never thought I'd be in the middle of a backyard Cold War, but there I was, coordinating a troop of military gnomes against a woman who believed my garden was a clandestine bugging base. The irony was such that sometimes I found myself laughing alone in the middle of the afternoon with a beer in my hand, looking at my gnomes armed with plastic miniatures, while the crazy woman next door peered out of the window as if she was about to activate SWAT. She freaked out when she saw it. I could tell right away. First, she stayed still for about 30 seconds, staring at the gnomes, her mouth hung open. Breakfast probably spilled on the balcony. Then she started shaking her head and walking in circles. She looked like she was having a mental breakdown in real time. And of course, she couldn't let it go. Not with an ego that big. So she started sending emails, lots of them, to the condominium, to the residents' association, to the landlord she hadn't seen in months. And they all had the same tenor. My neighbor is using ceramic figures to send subliminal signals of psychological warfare. Yes, that's right. She claimed to be the victim of symbolic domestic terror. She wrote those words. I didn't make them up. She claimed that the dwarves had now assumed an offensive posture, that the military configuration indicated preparation for a hostile surveillance operation. Guys, she said that the gnome with the binoculars was a sniper, ready to collect images from her bedroom window. I almost peed with laughter, and as if that wasn't enough, she started building defenses. Yes, the woman built barricades in her backyard. She used cardboard boxes, beach umbrellas, and even an overturned plastic garden chair to make a sort of retaining wall between her land and mine. It looked like a post-apocalyptic camp, a suburban Mad Max. She spent the day dragging things into the garden, putting up weird signs, hanging up cloths and towels as camouflage, and all because 3 plastic gnomes were looking in the wrong direction. I started getting calls, neighbors calling me from their corners, trying to understand what was going on. Is everything all right there? Or, did you see the barricade the woman made? It looks like there's going to be an alien invasion. And of course, there were the gossips who loved it. They'd sit on a beach chair on the sidewalk, popcorn in hand, watching everything as if it were Netflix Live. But the best was yet to come. She decided she needed to fight back, and in the most bizarre way possible. Instead of gnomes, she put up scarecrows. Yes, 2 human scarecrows dressed in handmade uniforms, holding signs that read, "Area under civilian surveillance, property audited by independent security," and the most wonderful of all, caution, mental energy sensors installed. And these scarecrows were strategically positioned facing my gnomes. It looked like a summit meeting was taking place between toy military forces and rag dolls. The whole neighborhood was in shock. Nobody knew whether to laugh or call the police. I myself stood still for a good 10 minutes, staring at the ridiculous scene my backyard had become. It looked like a theater of war put on by a hyperactive child with access to £1.99 stores and a lifetime subscription to conspiracy theories. But the circus had to go on. I couldn't just let it go. Now it was a question of honor. If she wanted to play Cold War, I was going to respond as if I were a retired general with time on my hands and anger built up. And that's when I came up with my most ingenious idea. And also the most idiotic, I admit. I put up a fake sign in the garden. I took a board, painted it red, and wrote, "Monitored area. Invisible drones on constant patrol." It didn't take half an hour after I put up the sign for her to come out of the house like a rocket. She came down the stairs from her deck with a pair of binoculars in her hand, scanning the sky with a paranoid look, as if she was going to find a drone camouflaged among the birds. The woman was going crazy. She was shouting to herself, pointing at the sky, and then started clapping her hands in the air, as if to scare away the imaginary drones. I thought about calling for professional help, but then I remembered that this was the same person who claimed that my gnomes had a direct connection to the CIA. The most ironic thing? She was the kind of person who said she loved individual freedom, but freaked out when someone put an ornament in her garden. And she called herself spiritual. She once stopped me on the sidewalk to say that her crystals were resonating at a low frequency because of my technological spy vibrations. This coming from someone who spent the day planted in front of 5 cameras, recording the neighbor's dog pooping. Deep down, I began to find it a bit sad. Comical, of course, but also a bit pathetic. It seemed that this woman desperately needed an imaginary war to fill the void of a purposeless life. The gnomes weren't the problem. They never were. They were just the pretext. What really bothered me was the fact that I was laughing, that I didn't take seriously the authoritarian and paranoid little world she had created in her head. And that, for this type of person, is the greatest possible attack, being ignored and ridiculed. But what I didn't expect was that she would appeal. Because when a lunatic feels cornered, he kicks the bucket. And that's exactly what she did. The day after the outbreak of invisible drones, I thought she was going to take a break. After all, I'd been through all the stages of urban insanity, spying by gnomes, tablecloth barricades, and militarized straw dolls. I thought the woman was finally going to look in the mirror, see that she had become the neighborhood joke, and back down. But no, I should have reminded her that people like that don't back down. To back down would be to admit she was wrong. And for her, admitting she was wrong was like kneeling before Satan. So, like a good self-centered condo dweller, she went beyond what was acceptable. It all started when I went to pick up my car in the morning and noticed a black bag on the hood. It was an ordinary garbage bag, but there was something in it. I opened it, thinking it was something from an animal, and almost had a fit of laughter and hatred at the same time. Inside the bag were 3 gnomes, my gnomes, and they were all decapitated. She killed my gnomes. That's right. The woman broke into my garden at dawn and beheaded my ceramic dwarves. Who does that? Who gets so angry at decorative figurines that they commit symbolic murder in broad daylight? It was as if she had performed an exorcism ritual against what she imagined to be a Pentagon spy cell. I swear I stood there for a good few minutes looking at the broken pieces. The heads were all separated from the bodies, with the little painted eyes still smiling. And there, holding a decapitated piece of gnome, I realized that the joke was over. It was no longer just a joke. She had crossed the line between amusing delirium and bizarre crime. And the worst part? She didn't even bother to hide it. It was all out in the open, like a warning, a message of war. I called the police. Of course I did. I had cameras in the yard, and even with all the paranoia, she was still stupid enough not to realize where they were positioned. I filmed everything. The invasion, the destruction, her jumping over the fence like she was part of a secret military mission, with a pair of garden shears in her hand and the look on her face like she was going to save the country. I put everything in the bulletin. The policeman watched the video with the most confused face in the world. He tried to remain serious, but at certain moments I saw that he was trying not to laugh. They made the formal visit to her house, and when they got there, she had the nerve to say that she was only removing threats to the security of the neighborhood. Yes, threats. Plaster statues. The woman swore she was defending her home, as if she had killed a miniature Russian spy. I kept expecting her to be arrested, of course, but, as always in these situations, all they did was issue a warning and say that they'll keep monitoring. Monitoring what? The next night? Raid with torches? And as if that wasn't enough, she decided to fight back again. The following weekend, she organized a meeting in front of her house, a community event, according to the printed flyer she left in my mailbox. As if it wasn't a passive-aggressive message that she was still in control of the narrative, she spread plastic chairs on the sidewalk, brought orange juice and cookies, and attracted half a dozen old pensioners who have nothing else to do but complain about leaves on the ground. There she was, standing, giving a speech as if she were a candidate for some position that only exists inside her head. She talked about emotional security, properties free from hostile elements, and, of course, the harmful influence of decorations with hidden intentions. Me, from the window, filming everything with my cell phone and sending it to my friends. It had already become entertainment, but what she didn't know was that, while she was ranting like a paranoid preacher, I was already preparing my final answer. I revived the gnomes. Not the same ones. Those were too broken to be saved. But I went to a gardening store in another town, because mine had run out of everything I'd bought, and bought a new troop. Not ordinary gnomes. These came with a helicopter pilot's uniform, a paratrooper's backpack, and helmets with gold stars. I set up a kind of elite special squad, and this time I installed LED lights in their eyes, lights that flashed discreetly at night, just to fuel her outburst even more. I also placed discreet speakers in the garden, and from time to time, in the early hours of the morning, she would set them to play radar sounds, like those beep, beep sounds you see in movies. Nobody could hear it but her, and I knew it, because the following nights, she would turn on all the lights in her house, as if there had been an apocalyptic blackout. She was going crazy. Literally, she slept with the windows sealed, covered her own motion sensors with insulating tape, and, according to a gossipy neighbor, started walking around the house with aluminum foil on her head. I don't know how much of it is true, but knowing the history, I believe every word of it. The tables had turned. She had waged war, and I had responded with the kind of revenge that doesn't require shouting, just creativity and patience. But I still didn't know that the worst was yet to come, because this woman, this paranoid entity incarnate in the flesh, still had a card hidden up her sleeve. And when she played that card, then the whole neighborhood understood who we were dealing with. I thought I'd won. I really did. The woman was already sleeping in a tinfoil hat, probably cooking her own brain with paranoia 24 hours a day, and the whole neighborhood was on my side. They greeted me in the street with that complicit smile that says, "You're crazy, but you're right." I thought the show was over, that the clown was going to leave the circus and disappear over the horizon like a collective delirium. But no, because, like anyone obsessed with control, when she loses control, she tries to destroy everything around her. And the way she did it was with a card up her sleeve so absurd that, if I hadn't lived through it, I'd call it cheap fiction. She reported me to an environmental agency. You didn't read that wrong. The woman went to a real public office, a state agency, and accused me of using the gnomes as a form of light pollution and deliberate sensory pollution. What does that mean? I didn't know either, but I soon found out. I received a formal summons, a brown envelope with a state seal, summoning me to provide clarification on disturbance of environmental tranquility in a low-impact residential area. The term seemed to have come out of a legal dictionary. I went to the place indicated, thinking it was a joke, but it wasn't. There was a serious employee who looked like he hated his job, reading a complaint written with a wealth of detail that only someone out of touch with reality could produce. It said that my gnomes interfered with the local fauna, that the LED lights affected the birds' sleep, that the radar sounds caused confusion in bats, and that all this was part of an attempt at symbolic domination of the collective space. Yes, the woman wrote that, and someone in the government read it and called me. I tried to explain that they were ceramic statues, that the lights flashed at low intensity, at random times, that the radar sound was too low to cross the garden. But even so, the inspector said he would have to pay a visit to check the real impact. So he did. He turned up 2 days later with a notebook, a tape measure, and a decibel sensor. He looked like he was about to measure the radiation in Chernobyl. She wrote everything down, took photos of each gnome as if they were bank robbery suspects. And meanwhile, she, of course, was on the other side of the fence, with her arms crossed and that look of early victory, as if she had won an international case in The Hague. But then came the moment that made me regain faith in humanity. The inspector looked at me, looked at the gnomes, and said, "Are you sure this is the problem?" And then he let out a muffled laugh, put the pad away, and said there was no infraction. He also noted that the lights were within the permitted limit, and that the sound was harmless and even funny. She got angry. She started shouting that he was an accomplice, that the government had been taken over, that it was all part of a network of manipulation. And then, as icing on the cake, she took her cell phone out of her pocket and started recording everything, shouting, screaming, saying that the truth would come out. She spoke in the tone of an apocalyptic prophet, with a drama that would make a Mexican soap opera look like a BBC documentary. The inspector looked at me, shrugged, and left without saying another word. After that, she went into an even crazier spiral. She stopped leaving the house during the day. She sent handwritten notes, slipped under the neighbors' doors, saying that we were all being manipulated by vibrational frequencies emitted by my gnomes. He had posters printed and pasted on the streetlights, warning that my garden was a psychic interference zone and that staying for more than 10 minutes exposed the citizen to the risk of mental dissociation. The children on the street began to use this as an excuse not to go to class. "Mom, I can't go past the gnome's uncle's house. Otherwise, my brain will dissolve." The teenagers? They had fun. They started taking selfies with the gnomes. They even set up an Instagram account, Gnome USA. In the middle of the morning, without warning, Karen went out into the street with a megaphone. A megaphone. She climbed up on a beach chair in the middle of the sidewalk and started giving a speech. She said that the neighborhood had been taken over by symbolic elements of visual oppression, that I was an undercover agent, that we were all under surveillance. There was even a handmade poster with a crude montage, my face stuck on the body of a CIA agent, next to a gnome with red eyes. The woman was in another plane of reality. The police were called. Again. This time there was no talking. They took her away. I don't know if it was to the police station or to the psychiatrist, but I saw her get into the car still holding the megaphone, shouting that she was going to sue planet Earth. Since then, she's disappeared. No one has seen her since. The house was locked, the curtains always closed. Either she went to live with a relative, or she was finally hospitalized. I sincerely hope she has found help, because it's good to laugh, but seeing someone lose themselves like that also hurts. The gnomes are still there, watching over my garden like good decorative soldiers. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like and comment below. Ciao.